The rain hammered against the diner windows like 1,000 impatient fingers, blurring the world outside into streaks of gray. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed softly, reflecting off the chrome edges of every booth. At one of them sat Trevor Hale, staring at a plate he couldn't bring himself to touch. Just an hour earlier, he had believed this lunch would change everything: his future, his plans, his sense of finally being seen. Instead, all it took was a few cold words and the sharp sound of a chair scraping back for Trevor to realize he had been left behind again. The seat across from him was empty, achingly empty, and he sat frozen, his heart collapsing in slow motion as he replayed the moment he'd tried so hard not to expect. He didn't even notice the woman in the yellow cardigan at first, not until she leaned slightly toward him with gentle concern softening her features. And in a voice barely above a whisper, she offered the words that would begin to sew his broken edges back together. "You don't have to eat alone. If you believe in kindness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts." Trevor had always been the type who pretended disappointment didn't crush him, who kept his shoulders squared and his expression neutral even when life gnawed at him relentlessly. Growing up in Cedar Bluff, Missouri, he had learned early that if he wanted something, he would have to build it with his own hands. His parents barely spoke to each other, drifting through the house like shadows that forgot they once knew warmth. Trevor found refuge in school, where teachers noticed his quiet diligence, especially his love for engineering and the way his eyes lit up whenever he talked about building things that actually worked. But life after high school had been a series of slow steps backward rather than forward. His college funds evaporated when his father lost his job, and Trevor found himself assembling machinery in a warehouse instead of drafting blueprints in a lecture hall. Still, he never fully let go of the belief that something better was possible. So when he heard that a local business owner, a man named Greg Turner, was looking to mentor young adults with dreams of entering technical trades, Trevor felt the unfamiliar flicker of hope. He sent an email. Greg responded. They scheduled a meeting, this meeting, at a small diner just outside Kansas City. Trevor had practiced what to say as he drove there, tapping his fingers anxiously against the steering wheel the whole way. He imagined Greg shaking his hand, telling him he had potential, maybe even offering him a real apprenticeship. But when Greg arrived, the signs were clear before the conversation even began. The man checked his phone constantly, sighed heavily, and finally muttered that he had overestimated how much time he could give. Then he stood up, apologized vaguely, and walked out before Trevor could form another sentence. Trevor stayed behind, not because he was hungry, but because leaving felt like giving up too quickly. He sat in the booth, replaying how foolish he must have looked, eager, hopeful, naive. His throat tightened. He lowered his gaze so no one would see the humiliation pooling behind his eyes. Across the aisle sat a woman named Claire Rowan, a middle school teacher who stopped by this diner every Thursday after finishing her shift. She noticed people easily. That was part of her job and part of her nature. The moment she stepped inside, she had seen Trevor sitting alone, his shoulders hunched just slightly, the way people hunch when something inside them has just cracked. At first, she wasn't sure whether to approach. Some people need solitude to settle their emotions. But after several minutes of watching him push a single crumb around his plate, she realized this wasn't solitude, this was defeat, and she couldn't walk away from that. When she whispered her invitation, Trevor looked up slowly as if unsure she had spoken to him. There was something steady and kind in her expression, something that made it easier for him to breathe. Even then, he hesitated. He didn't want pity. But her smile wasn't pity, it was recognition, understanding, the sort of expression teachers wear when they see someone lost and instinctively reach out. He moved to her booth. The air between them felt fragile at first, like stepping onto thin ice. Trevor wasn't used to opening up. Words felt heavy in his throat. But Claire had a gift for drawing stories out of people without making them feel exposed. She asked about his interests, and when he mentioned engineering, her eyes brightened. She told him about students she'd taught who blossomed when someone simply believed in them. Slowly, Trevor let the truth slip out about the failed mentorship meeting, the dreams he kept tucked away, the way each setback made him feel smaller. Claire listened without interruption. Then she leaned back, folded her hands in front of her, and told him something that struck deeper than he expected. She'd grown up with a brother who had been brilliant but constantly dismissed because he didn't follow the traditional path. It took one teacher, a single person, to tell him he mattered for his life to change. Claire told Trevor softly that sometimes the right opportunity doesn't come from where you expect, and that being rejected didn't mean he was unworthy. It meant the person who left didn't see clearly enough. Not everyone does. Trevor felt something unspool inside him, a tension he had carried for years, loosening thread by thread. The rain outside had softened, and the diner's warm lights cast a gentle glow across the table. Claire wasn't offering a perfect fix. She wasn't pretending to hold all the answers. She was simply sitting with him when he needed someone most, meeting him exactly where he was. The conversation stretched for nearly an hour, shifting from heavy topics to lighter ones. Trevor even laughed once, quietly, cautiously, as if trying out the sound after a long absence. When the waitress came to refill their drinks, she paused, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Claire's kindness had created a small pocket of peace in the middle of Trevor's storm. Before they left, she scribbled her email on a napkin and slid it across the table. She told him that her school collaborated with a local technical program and that one of their administrators, a woman named Denise Marlowe, was always eager to help adults regain their footing. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a path. And paths, Trevor realized, were the only way forward. When Trevor stepped outside, the rain had faded to a mist, the sky beginning to brighten around the edges. Something unfamiliar pulsed in his chest. Not quite certainty, but not hopelessness either. He thanked Claire and watched her walk toward her car, the yellow cardigan almost glowing against the overcast sky. He didn't know then just how much that moment would reshape the coming months. The next day, he reached out to Denise. One meeting turned into a course enrollment, which turned into an apprenticeship at a local manufacturing firm that valued precision and curiosity. Two qualities Trevor held in abundance. And every few weeks, Claire checked in, cheering him on, reminding him that progress could be slow and still be meaningful. Years later, Trevor would look back on that diner booth as the turning point of his life. The place where a stranger's quiet compassion helped him step out of the shadows he'd been living in. Claire never asked for anything in return. She simply saw a hurting person and chose to share a table. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us continue telling stories of kindness and everyday miracles. Before you go, comment below. Have you ever had someone show up for you when you least expected it?